Welcome to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You are listening to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace and Tyler Hudson. This week, we will be discussing the topic of biblical economics. What does God's design for economics and government look like? What type of economic system should governments adopt? Tyler and I will be breaking down this topic over the course of the week. God has provided us with His economic plans for governments to follow. It is crucial for us to be well equipped with this knowledge, especially in the face of challenges we are currently experiencing in the world today. Capitalism is being denigrated, and our children are being taught that different economic systems, such as communism and socialism, are better, even though these systems have been proven to fail everywhere they have been tried.
Welcome to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace and Tyler Hudson. And this week, folks, we're going to be talking about the subject of biblical economics. What is God's design for economics, for government? What kind of government economic system should they adopt? And Tyler and I are going to kind of break this down a little bit over the week there. We've got what I believe are God's economic plans for an economy, for a government to follow. And we need to be better equipped with this because we're being challenged in America today by a different type of an economy, an economic system, mainly communism and socialism. And we're seeing these things being taught to our kids. And our kids are growing up now. They have gone through college. They've been indoctrinated. And I'm using that word on purpose. They've been indoctrinated. And on the surface, these teachings sound good, helpful, kind, loving of our less fortunate people who don't, have riches and opportunities and stuff there. And they see the rich cats in this, in our society and think, we need to share the wealth, help those who are poor and needy. And communism is the answer to that, so they say. So that's what they're being taught. And quite frankly, many adults who oppose the thinking and the teaching of communism, they don't have the biblical answers. And what's surprising is that some of these communists are using the Bible to lay out their arguments. And so, Tyler, what I want you to do is use their two most favorite verses, and I want you to play the role of the, kind of like the devil's advocate. I want you to take their side and use these verses the way they do to kind of suggest, God is teaching communism here. So where would we go? What are those verses? And play that out for us, okay?
Let me start by saying, I know I'm in the center of God's will, but I'm asked to play the devil on anything. Amen. So I'm so thankful for that. And no, I'm just kidding. So our first verse here is in Acts chapter 2 and verse 45. A lot of people will use this. It says, or we'll go to a verse before that, 44. And all that believed were together and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men as every man had need. Surely, that's pretty much word for word saying that we should gather all the things that we have and divide them up equally and make sure that everyone that's in need has something. So, how do you explain that away?
Well, okay. Well, let's build the case. Common. There's that word communism. We ought to take everything that's common to us there, sell them. Mm-hmm. Those who have much, sell them and give to the poor, give to those who are in need, and stuff. Now, did the Bible say that? What's the answer to that? Yeah, the Bible said it. So, does it mean truly then that we should live under this way of communism? Before I answer that, Tyler, go to the next verse because it kind of says the same thing. And now Paul here is laying this out here. Before we had Luke, now we have Paul, one of the major apostles of the Bible. Most of our New Testament came from him. Most of our doctrines come from his writings under inspiration. So what did he say for us in his second letter to the church in Corinth, 2 Corinthians?
2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 13 says, "For I mean not that other men be eased and ye burdened, but by an equality that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality." As it is written, he that had gathereth much had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack.
All right, so that verse 14, equality. That's the goal of communism, right? And so, everyone's equal. No one is richer than the other. So we're going to wipe out poverty and so on there by taking those who have abundance, sell it, and give it to those who are in need. And when the day comes, that they have more instead of more abundance, when they become productive and whatnot, and they now have abundance, we take from that and give to others who are in need. And you may now be, a seesaw effect, and now you may be in need now. So, so what does this really teach? Each time you look at this, the question is, are they doing it out of duress? Are they obligated to do it? Or are they choosing by free will to give to those who are in need? What do you think is going on here in this passage, Tyler?
I'm actually looking at some other passages that I have studied before too, as it deals with the poor. And that particular I know what the Bible teaches about it, and so can I allude to another verse to answer your question, because it will answer it? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
In Leviticus 19:10 it says, "And thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord your God." So they used to have these, whatever it was they were growing, they would leave a portion of their field for the poor. As a matter of fact, you see that with Boaz and Ruth, right? That's how Ruth came to sort of know Boaz. And so to answer your question, I believe God's way, God does have a plan for the poor. God's plan is not that we just completely neglect the poor. As a matter of fact, he even talks about blessing those that help the poor. But I don't believe it's a matter of let's take everything everybody has and divvy it up into equal parts and distribute it out. And that's essentially what's kind of being taught today with socialism and communism. Did I answer your question?
Well, here in the Old Testament, this is an obligation. God's saying, don't glean everything out of your field. Leave the corners of the field so that those who are in need can come and harvest for themselves and so on. So we have an element of something being obligated. Would you agree that passage in the Old Testament in Leviticus is an obligation for someone to follow?
Yeah, it sounds like a command to me. Yeah. Okay. But let's go to the context of these New Testament passages, okay? And let's talk about that Old Testament passage in a minute. I think that deals in another area. That doesn't quite pertain to what's going on in both of the passages that you're talking about in Acts chapter 2 and in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. What's important? Every time you deal with the Bible, you have to deal with context. The Old Testament passage has a context to it. We're talking to a nation of Israel that God has set aside to be different than any other nation, but there are principles that we can follow from that there. And I think it's important. We'll get back to that. But I think your diversion, not that it's bad, it's a good question, good point that you brought up, because it kind of deals with it. But we need to deal with the context here. Were these people in Acts chapter 2 obligated to sell their goods and to give it to the poor and needy? Was that happening in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 where they were obligated? That's the question. Is this teaching obligation, or is this a free will choice of people to give to these people that have need? What's being taught here? Well, it's, if you read the context makes it clear. These people are choosing by their free will,
out of the abundance and love of their heart, too, they see other Christians and other fellow believers, man, they're struggling, they're hurting. You know what? God has blessed me with some means, and I can help with that. And God blessed me with these things so that now I can cash this out or take some money that I've got already that's liquidable, and I can give it to another person to help them with their need. God has blessed me. They're not being told, you have to give that. I'm going to take this from you and sell what you've got so that it can help other people with their needs. No, that's not going on out of obligation. It's purely done by a free will. Same thing in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. You start at the beginning of the verse. It says out of the chapter of giving to the need of the brethren in Macedonia, you know, these people were in great need, but those who were giving were also giving out of their deep poverty and the liberality of their heart. For their power I bear record, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves. So they willingly gave it. In chapter 9 of 2 Corinthians, all this great passages on giving and helping of other people's needs. But in chapter 9, verse 6 and 7, but this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap sparingly. He that soweth bountifully shall reap bountifully. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give. Not grudgingly, but or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. It's not giving out of, if you give because, you know, some of their, they made me give. That, and sometimes that happens. You may feel out of duress. Someone's kind of cornered you, you know, we need your help. We're going to, we're going to take up this offering and shame on you if you don't give type of thing there. That's giving out of necessity. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. You know, the Bible says, don't give out of necessity. Give out of generosity, out of love. God loveth a cheerful giver. So, do these passages teach communism? Do they teach communism? What do you believe?
I don't believe they do, no. I think, I don't see anywhere in the Bible where it says, I mean, the problem is, and I know I'm going to get ahead of us because I've seen what we're going to be talking about, but there's other parts of the Bible too that talk about, you know, he that's unwilling to work shouldn't eat kind of a thing. So, if you're just going to take up everything everybody has, divide it up equally to everyone else, then you're essentially feeding someone who's unwilling to work. And so I don't believe that's what the Bible is saying.
Yeah, it's not. It would be a faulty interpretation to take this passage and say that, here the Bible is teaching communism. No, what it is teaching is generosity. It's teaching having love and giving to people's needs. But communism is obligating people to take away from what they've worked for, to take from them, to give those who have not worked for it, to give it to them. And so to use these passages accordingly to argue that case is lifting these verses out of context, and these are free will offerings there. We'll talk more about the poor because that's an important issue. God has a lot to say about that. So we'll get into God's biblical economics more next in the next broadcast. I hope you'll join us tomorrow at the Corner of Truth and Courage. God bless you.